Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about part 3 of NXIVM and Keith Raniere, the Cult of Personality. First order of business, I want to say thank you so much to my new subscribers. I see you, I notice it, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I hope to do these cases justice. I tend to cover true crime. I also do book reviews, like classic book reviews. I take requests. I also do not only past true crime like the Black Dahlia or Adam Walsh, I also do current true crime. And I will be going back to the Chad Daybell Lori Vallow case. So if you're on hold for that, it's still coming. But right now we're going to talk about NXIVM because there's still some folks that are waiting to find out what their sentencing is. If you're not caught up, I've done a part 1 and a part 2. They're my last 2 videos. Just go ahead and put this video on hold and go watch those and come right back. So let's get into it. It's 2002. Keith Raniere is the vanguard, the head of this executive success program. And there's a girl named Gina Hutchinson. She was 15 years old when she met Raniere and he was 24. Okay, so this was back when he was in the Amway time, all right, pre-ESP. She was underage and she meets Raniere again when he's working at Amway. She's in the 8th grade. And allegedly, and I'm going to use this word a lot, it's like salt, okay? I'm going to be salting everything with allegedly because I don't want to get sued, right? And I can be wrong. When someone says something, you know, and they say it in court, I might repeat it. But I'm not going to necessarily vouch for the veracity of their statement. They swore to it in court. So I'm going to use allegedly. If you don't like it, just tune it out. Allegedly, Keith had told Gina that it was okay because her soul was older than her biological age. And she's a Mormon. She had a Mormon family. And allegedly, her little sister essentially catches Keith doing a runner, clambering out Gina's bedroom window. So her relationship with him back in the Amway time became known to the family. And the family allegedly thought that maybe they would get married. But they don't. No shocker. And so she breaks away from Keith. She leaves ESP. She wasn't involved in allegedly in that time period. So then ESP gets started, and the intergroup allegedly contact Gina to return to the group. Let's go to 2002. Or 2002, she takes an intensive and accuses Raniere of allegedly, previously, statutorily raping her as a child, as a teen. And so she's bringing up that Raniere had done this to her in an intensive. And I'm sure it caused quite a stir. In October of 2002, she ends up outside a Buddhist monastery. Apparently she did go to this monastery, so it wasn't like some random place, in Woodstock, New York, which was 1.5 hours from the ESP headquarters. This is what NXIVM will brand into. They find her dead from a gunshot wound. A shotgun blast, no less, okay? A shotgun blast to the head. And the death is ruled a suicide. And many today still fear that it was a homicide. Also, not even factoring in all the head games that went on in ESP and the way they could manipulate the people, especially someone who is coming forth and saying, oh my God, he did this to me when I was underage. That's not going to fly high. All right. That is, he's celibate, right? He's a renunciate. This isn't going to go over well at all, in my opinion. And also, if you want to just look at it just from a standing back and taking a look at the facts I just told you, how often do you hear about self-inflicted gunshots, shotgun wounds done by young women? It's just not a common way for a woman to commit suicide. So let's put a pin in that and let's move on, because there are more horrors to come. Sad to say, but it's the truth. There are more horrors that await us. Now, are they coincidental horrors? Who knows? Let's let the authorities decide. February 2003. There's a sketchy death of a woman named Kristen Snyder, and they also called her Chris. So let's just call her Chris because there's another Kristen that's involved. And so to avoid any confusion about the Kristens, we'll call her Chris because that's what the family called her. So Chris was an environmental consultant, and she was perfectly happy by all reports until she took her first ESP class. That's the Executive Success Program. And it was in Alaska. And she ends up disappearing in Alaska. So the last time she is seen is at an ESP event. So she took an ESP intensive. She became obsessed with ESP by all accounts. And she's a lesbian, all right? And this is 2003. It wasn't today's age where people are very accepting of it, okay? So she's a lesbian, and she allegedly told her wife, Heidi, that she was pregnant with Raniere's baby because she had already gone through one set of intensives. And then, I gotta say, this is just my speculations. It's unknown if Raniere tried some kind of conversion therapy on her because she was a lesbian. So she has this first intensive where she actually allegedly met Keith. Then she becomes totally obsessed. Then she tells her wife, I'm pregnant with Raniere's baby, all right? And I don't know what she thought. So then she has enrolled in the second intensive, right? And she rolls in this 16-day intensive at the Westmark Hotel in Anchorage. That's February 6, 2003 is when this allegedly occurred. So it was on the 10th day of the course, and she's removed from this workshop. She shouted during the training regarding being pregnant with Raniere's baby. So allegedly, she had seemingly already told Heidi this, and now she's telling it to this group, these espions. And the class was told to ignore her multiple outbursts. And she allegedly waved goodbye to Heidi, who was in the class with her, by the way, her wife, through a window as she's being led away from the class. I don't know if they just kicked her out and she walked of her own accord or if somebody led her away. That part I don't know. Heidi was allegedly told that she was not to take Chris to the hospital. And then Chris goes missing that very evening. So again, another one alleging some kind of sexual impropriety regarding Keith in the company, in the intensives. All right? And not within within a year? That's crazy. She waves goodbye to Heidi. Heidi's allegedly told not to take her to a hospital. Chris goes missing that evening. Allegedly, Heidi tells the police that Chris was sleep deprived, that she was delusional, and that she was suicidal. So Heidi allegedly also told the police, when they were trying to find her, that Chris did frequent Seward, Alaska. So I guess that's maybe why they found her truck so fast, because her truck, a black Toyota, was located in Seward on February 8th, 2 days later, all right, 2003. And that's 2.5 hours from Anchorage. So keep that in mind. The Alaskan police believe that Kristen traveled in her Toyota Tacoma to a campground along the Resurrection Bay, and that she took an abandoned kayak on the property. It was in their yard, okay? Paddled it out into the Resurrection Bay and intentionally capsized the 16-foot kayak. And then no body is ever found, no kayak is ever found or recovered. So that's what the police believed, at least at the time. So a suicide note is discovered in the truck that's there. Allegedly, 2 handwritten notes on 2 separate pads were observed by the police, and resting on the passenger seat of the car, these notes were, and a sheet of paper that was describing the Executive Success Program. Okay, so allegedly, seemingly, she hot-footed right out of the intensive, being kicked out, and then she drove to Seward, 2.5 miles, being out of her head. And there's a fuel receipt dated 2/6/2003 at 6:47. So apparently she fueled up, or someone did. And allegedly one of the class participants, okay, that had been in that class, had a boyfriend who owned a cabin right near where the truck was found. And so people were thinking that maybe there was something suspicious there. Who knows? But the cabin was totally boarded up for the winter because this was winter, guys. So imagine how she just finds a kayak in February in Alaska. That's got to be snow covered, right? Mike Miller of Miller's Landing, that's where this area was. He's told the police allegedly that he saw that same black truck that morning, but then it had been moved from where it was later discovered by the police. So I really don't know what to make of this. I frankly don't. Once the vehicle was found, Miller noticed that the old kayak that had been in the yard was missing. So, once they find it, I'm sure the police were starting to ask questions. And he's like, oh, that old kayak is missing, the 16-foot kayak that had been upside down in the yard. There was a 3-day search that searched that whole entire area. And they found no body and found no kayak. Okay. So, and also in the suicide note, which I should have brought it up for you, she talks about how she's been brainwashed by a group. She talked about executive success program, and she also says AKA NXIVM. And allegedly, their comeback for that was that they weren't called NXIVM yet, so someone planted that note there. But also allegedly on a sign-in sheet for those intensives, someone had wrote NXIVM, and it was spelled like the antacid or whatever. So I do believe at that time they already kind of were thinking they were also already calling it the new brand. It just hadn't been rebranded yet. Just FYI. She was saying some stuff in that suicide note that would curdle your blood about how she felt she was rotting inside. It was just horrible. And if we just want to take this as a plain suicide, the fact that no one looked further into this group that she says caused her to commit suicide is sus to me. Just my opinion. Mark Vincenti, who you probably know from The Vow, the filmmaker, he talked about hearing about a survivalist who left an intensive in Alaska, who stole a canoe and took it into a bay and disappeared. And that she left a suicide note in the car, but there was chatter, that the suicide note mentioned NXIVM, which it did, before it had been rebranded from ESP. However, seemingly, it had already been discussed that ESP would be branded into NXIVM at that time. It really wasn't a secret. But see, Mark wasn't in the group yet to know. So he's hearing these tales. You hear tales about maybe, say, Gina, or you hear tales about Kristen. And so, in my opinion, the group members are wanting to frame it a certain way to the new people about the things that have happened in the past. In my opinion, Raniere and co. were reframing the incident of her death to Vicente because her disappearance was before his time there. Okay, so let's add in something that happens later, but it's applicable to this. A mole called The Rat, okay, so it's The Rat, wrote in a 2010 blog post about feeling responsible for both Chris's, and Gina's deaths. All right, so the first two girls we've talked about in this video. Quote, this is what the mole allegedly wrote. I put the ideas in their heads. It was suicide. So it could not be linked to me and Keith, but we still encouraged it to happen. There's a belief that the mole is a viable person, not just some crank. I'm inclined to believe that someone drove that truck to Seward and left the suicide note as a red herring. That's just my opinion. To me, when you look at the note's handwriting and you compare it to a sample given by Heidi of Chris's handwriting pre-ESP, they aren't the same handwriting, in my opinion, okay? So we're to believe that Chris, she's kicked out of this intensive, that her wife Heidi stays inside, and that tells you something right there, that Heidi even felt obliged to stay there when your significant other is kicked out for screaming about Raniere's baby. I mean, yeah, okay. So Chris is completely unwell by everybody's agreement. She drives 2.5 hours away in the Alaskan winter, right? She finds some random kayak in a yard where she parks the truck at Miller's Landing, maneuvers it solo into the bay or the water, and then manages to capsize a 16-foot kayak. And then nobody finds the body or the kayak. Like, how much do you believe that? How believable is that? Here's the real kicker of this tale to me. And there's a couple other more kickers to come, but I'm going to try to keep things in order. Heidi pays her own ESP bill for the intensive, but she did ask for a partial refund allegedly for Chris's intensive bill, and it was denied, and so she paid. She asked for a partial refund because Chris was kicked out of the class. Chris' suicide happened during their watch. And guess what? They don't give her a refund. Is that not just stunning to you? Maybe would have found out more if they hadn't paid, and then a lawsuit would have occurred, and then in discovery all this interesting stuff would have come out. Okay, so 2004. Enter Claire Bronfman. And you know what? I don't want to be sued, so I'm going to say allegedly all over the place. And Claire was allegedly training towards the 2004 Olympics, and she was wearing NXIVM, like stitched on her gear, riding gear. So, if she did well in the Olympics, then Raniere would get the credit and be known for some great trainer. But Claire failed to make the final cut. And allegedly, Claire used their vast fortune to fight NXIVM's lawsuits, suing NXIVM's enemies, perceived enemies, and gave millions to Raniere, allegedly, arguably, up to $150 million. That's what's been offered in the court file. That's what defectors have said. That's what people close have said. Make of that what you will. Her father, Edgar Bronfman Sr., allegedly fell out with the group after he heard that $2 million was given over to Raniere, and then allegedly it was a loan or whatever, but he saw that and he found that to be sketchy, allegedly. And so he thought it was a cult, and in October of 2003, Forbes magazine publishes a piece on ESP NXIVM where Edgar Sr. says as much. It's a cult. That was his opinion, and that's what he said. And allegedly, Raniere then starts blaming Edgar Bronfman Sr. and conversely his daughter/daughters, this is my opinion, for the bad publicity. Okay, because now he has bad publicity in Forbes magazine, and he probably was kind of flying under the radar, at least under the national radar. Maybe not the Albany radar, but he was flying under the radar. And then this Forbes magazine comes out, and it's not flattering to Raniere. And so he blames the Bronfmans essentially for it. It's a breach. It's an ethics issue. In my opinion, Raniere saw them as deep pockets. They had lots and lots and lots of money. I don't think you could argue that. And NXIVM, they were vindictive to their perceived enemies. And when people questioned, like, say, the bad publicity, they had to have a comeback. And if they commonly would say, if these accusations against NXIVM, Keith, ESP, or whatever are true, why isn't Raniere in jail? That was always their comeback. Well, guess what? Now their comeback it falls flat, right? Because he is in jail. But back then, they lured in people for different reasons. And in my opinion, they lured in the Bronfmans because of the deep pockets. That's my opinion. So let's go on to 2004. This is where it's going to start getting even really, darker. And you might say, well, Lord, you've already talked about 2 people that have committed suicide. How much darker can it get? Buckle up. A Mexican national is on a visitor's visa. Her name is Mariana. And she is the eldest of 3 sisters. There's a group of Mexicans that were interested, I guess the family was interested in the ESP/NXIVM group, and they come over, and there's one boy that didn't get the essay done to him, but you have Mariana, the oldest sister, Daniela, the middle sister, and Camilla is the younger sister, and this is discussed a lot at the trial because a lot of the charges revolve around the things that were especially done to Daniela and Camilla. So Mariana, the oldest sister, is allegedly having sex with Raniere, 2004, and allegedly sleeping with Pamka Fritz as well. I don't know if that just meant in the same bed. And so she's living with them. And in 2004, whenever Daniela turned 18, she's being groomed. Okay, and remember I talked about grooming doesn't start with one stroke. It's not like one stroke and you're groomed. It takes time. It takes effort. And Daniela is groomed, and Raniere begins a secret relationship on her birthday, like a week after her birthday. So he's already having sex with Mariana, her older sister, and living with Pam and the gang. And now he starts having sex with the middle sister. All right? All these Mexican girls had been honor students before their meetings with Raniere and coming over here to the U.S. and getting sucked up into his orbit. He was in his 40s, and Daniela is young, okay? She just turned 18. And in 2004, Raniere aids Daniela to enter the U.S. with a false ID, allegedly. And Raniere used Daniela also to install the key logging software to monitor all their enemies. Because now they're starting to get enemies, or what they thought are enemies. You know, anyone who speaks out against you, anyone who defects against you, anyone who doesn't agree with you or challenges you they're starting to get an enemies list. So he is encouraging people to gather this information. He starts having sex with Daniela as well, on the side, on the DL, right? And you might question, how did he keep this illicit sex, you know, not the known sex, but the illicit sex from all the other inner circle at that time? Well, here's the deal. Raniere used an area of the house, and I think it's at 8 Hale. They had, like I said, they had essentially, I wouldn't call it a compound, but different houses in a neighborhood, and then some surrounding people had houses. Like Nancy Salzman had an area, like her house was nearby. Okay, so we'll call it a compound, but there were other people living in the neighborhood as well. But there was a place at 8 Hale, I believe it was, that had a loft library, and you had to go up through a trap door. So this ensured secrecy. So no one was ever going to necessarily cold catch him having sex with the illicits, the ones that weren't introduced yet as being the sexual objects. So I just want to say, like, yeah, I mean, it could maybe become obvious that he's showing favoritism to certain people, but he actually ran scams on these women. All right, he did. So at his trial, the defense argued that Raniere had definite ground rules for his women. And the ground rule number 1 was, this is his defense attorney saying this, if a woman wants to be with Raniere, she can't be with anybody else. That's ground rule number 1. Ground rule number 2 was, that doesn't apply to Raniere. And they also said, you don't want to sign up, don't go. So he's saying essentially, all these people aren't victims, they're willing participants. And I want to ask you as a viewer, do you believe that's how he presented this deal, this agreement to these sisters? Do you really think that 3 blood sisters who come over here and are essentially young, the one didn't even turn 18, and then the other one was completely underage, she was 15. Do you think that that's how he presented it right out of the gate without being groomed? No, I submit to you that he groomed them and he brainwashed them. That's what I submit to you. Let's move on to September 2005. Raniere starts having sex with the minor sister, Camilla. She's age 15 years old, okay? So at this point, he's got Mariana up in the house with him and Pam. He's having sex with Daniela, and now he's moved on to Camilla. Camilla started out as a maid cleaning Nancy Salzman's house, and she begins teaching Spanish at the Rainbow Cultural Gardens. Remember, I told you about that was one of the groups under the NXIVM umbrella to have this multilingual experience for kids. Seemingly, and mind you, she's 15 years old. She's being a nanny and teaching Spanish. What is this? What is this world we're living in? Maybe she started as the housekeeper, and then once she got to be 18, she did Rainbow Cultural. I could be incorrect on the date on that, but this is craziness. Seemingly the government tried to prove her age, because there are photos involved here, by a scar that wasn't present in these underage photos that they seized from Raniere off his computer. Because see, what happened was later Camilla had an appendectomy, and what appendectomies do is back in those days, it tended to leave a scar on your abdomen, a pretty prominent scar, and so emails and the pictures are entered into evidence at the trial, Keith Raniere's trial, furthering the state's case that the date of the photos, that Camilla was 15 years old when he took those photos of her, and the location where he took them, which I believe was mostly in that loft. So. Child P, YouTube. November 2nd and 4th of 2005, that is when Raniere took the photos of Camilla, the nude child P, and kept the photos. Not only did he take the photos, he kept the photos. His taking and keeping of these photos is very trophy-esque, in my opinion. Note that his supporters maintain, I'm going to say the other side. The supporters maintain that the government somehow altered the metadata on these photos and that she really wasn't 15 at the time. Okay? That's their argument. 2005. Let's talk about another poor victim. Enter Sylvie. She is a British woman who quit school to show jump. That's for horses. And allegedly she met Claire Bronfman and moved to the U.S. to work with Claire, who owned her own horses. So Sylvie noticed that the riders at the farm were focused on their weight and their hair and their looks. Okay? You're show jumping. That's your training. And allegedly Claire paid for Sylvie's first ESP NXIVM classes, the initial classes, and she took the level 1 intensive, which was 16 days long. Typically it was like a 5-day and 11, and you could do them all together. So they have, like I said, 5-day, 11 days, and there would be multiple hours, like 14-hour days sometimes. So you got a lot of, in my opinion, brainwashing in one fell swoop. Allegedly, Claire obtained Sylvie's J1 visa, which was a training visa, because I think she was supposed to be training. And around March of 2006, eventually, I think that's when Claire quit the show jumping for the Olympics. So Sylvie becomes anorexic, and she had been before. It's no surprise that she does again around this group. So she arrives in the U.S. at a healthy 120 pounds. That's my size, okay? And she ends up to be 89 pounds and running a triathlon. Sylvie ends up with an ethical breach. And you're going to find out that whoever's not the favorite at the time usually ends up with an ethical breach, because it's a way to control and to keep somebody down on the sidelines doing whatever shitty labor or work that Keith wants you to do, some kind of penance. You'll get your ethical breach. Well, she got an ethical breach from being underweight, right? I mean, the irony is so rich. Allegedly, she was told, get to 100 pounds or leave the community. Get to 100 pounds or you leave this community. Who does that? So she goes back to London, gets back on track, but ends up lured back to the U.S. eventually. And there was a race allegedly called the Freihofer 5K in Albany. And allegedly Keith was going to be her running coach for this triathlon, because he's the guru of all things, right? He's just guru for everything. He knows how to do everything. It could be it stock market, be it MLM, be it, personal development, be it running, be it horse jumping. He's the genius. He's like God, right? So at one point, Sylvie gets an abscess. I don't want to get gross. She gets an abscess on her fanny, and it hurts, and so she doesn't want to train. I mean, this isn't like, oh, wow. She gets a full-on abscess, and she doesn't want to train until it's healed, and I think that's even what her doctor tells her, right? So she becomes very ill, and she's accused by them of slipping back into being a robot. Like, that's what they kind of called people before they were SPNs and following the program. And so what she does is she fights through it, and her abscess becomes a fistula. These people, they're monsters. They are hardcore monsters. And we'll catch up with Sylvie later. I just want to let you know, Sylvie, man, my heart is with you. You went through some crap with them. Approximately late 2004, this is when Mark Vicente is invited by Nancy Salzman and Barbara Boucher to attend a symposium. And allegedly they claimed to Mark that they knew how to do some of the things that he hypothesized in his movie, and to hack the human behavioral equation, or the human behavior equation. So Vicente had been in this Ramtha group. Some people call it a cult. I don't know anything about them. For 10 years off and on. Okay, so he's been in one of these kind of allegedly high control groups already. And he made a documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know? And it got some acclaim. So they were interested in him. And so allegedly, Nancy and Sarah also wanted to meet the scientists that he had in his film. So Mark didn't have to pay for his first intensive. He was lured in. He was recruited by Nancy. And Mark's interest was allegedly to make a film to change the world. That was his, especially, I guess, his life goal. He wanted to make a film that would change the world. So Raniere also starts giving Vicente interviews, and you will see a lot of things in The Vow. It's rich with interview footage, but in my opinion, it could have been shut down from 8 episodes to maybe 4. I mean, it's just so rich with footage, it's too much. I cannot stand seeing that much of Raniere. I get the point. Vicente becomes Raniere's documentarian, and Vicente even begins teaching groups in audio and in video production, so that everybody can learn how to capture the guru and all his words of wisdom. So in June of 2011, I just want to note, he also marries Bonnie Peace, singer and actress, and he sucks her into NXIVM. So that's how she gets in. But he's in there in 2004, late 2004, and he starts videotaping. So 2005, the executive board, according to Vicente, so it's not inclusive, or exclusive, is Barbara Boucher, Lauren Saltzman, Edgar Boone, don't know who he is, Karen Unterreiner, Loretta Garza. The CEO was Nancy Salzman, and Keith was the Vanguard. And I think that they always stay as the CEO in the Vanguard. Now we're going to get into some of the legal stuff. In 2005, enter Stephen Herbitz. I'm getting all this information from the court trials, the court trial transcripts. He testified for the state. He worked for Edgar Bronfman, the multi-billionaire, for 20 years. Not exclusively. He had a lot of great jobs. I'm just going to give you a little bit. I'm not going to give you his whole CV, but he was also the active Secretary General of the World Jewish Congress and worked for the Pentagon under Rumsfeld. He also reported to Edgar Edgar worked at the World Jewish Congress. So that's a partial of his tenured background. This guy was and is no dummy. So in 2005, there's a meeting with Edgar and Stephen because allegedly Claire and Sarah, the daughters, and Nancy Salzman allegedly needed help with some of NXIVM's public relations. This is all according to Stephen. So if you have beef with anything I'm saying, go to the trial transcripts and read what he said. He says a lot more than I'm distilling down. Stephen Herbitz gave the folks an introduction to one of his public relations colleagues. And I'm going to go through him a couple times because he keeps getting kind of asked to help. Stephen claimed that between 2005 and 2007, the girls asked him to contact the Attorney General or the Governor of New York or New Jersey, depending, which he refused to do, as he considered it inappropriate and preposterous. He told them that the prosecutors have discretion on whom to prosecute. And I do believe in this case he was talking about Rick Allen Ross and some of the other people that had that they had deemed enemies. Stephen will be asked to help again in 2008, but when they first allegedly came to him, and Edgar was, I don't know if he was in the meeting or not, but they met with them, and he was the attorney, and he was like, here, I'll listen to your daughter's issues or whatever, and let's look at it. He was like, he booted them off to a PR person. He referred them to a PR person that he knew. Okay? We will come back to this. We will touch back. We will circle back. 2006, according to the court testimony, Raniere was having sex with Pamka Fritz, Karen Unterreiner, Mariana, that's the elder of the Mexican sisters, and probably Daniela as well, Barbara Jeske, Barbara Boucher, Ivy, Dawn, Kristen, Keefe, not Chris, the deceased lady, Lauren Salzman, and Kathy Russell. And that, I don't believe that's an exclusive list. Okay, so that's 2006. Now, who knows who knew of the other ones, these inner circle folks? Because some of the people, he does it on the DL, up in the, up in the loft library with the trapdoor. Fall 2006. Danny, that's the middle sister of the Mexican sister of Mariana. What she does is she kisses a man named Ben. This is going to become a kind of a song you're going to hear. That she's not the only one that does the dastardly deed of kissing someone that's not Raniere, especially when you're one of a stable of women that you may or may not even know, right? Because you're not really supposed to be having a relationship with them. So you might have an interest in another person, especially if you're young. So she, kisses a man named Ben. Oh, how sweet. So she tells Raniere, acting like, Raniere's her bestie. They share information. They talk all the time. Raniere's her bestie. This guy, Ben, she tells him. But it was a bad thing. It was a bad, bad thing. So she recalled that Raniere raged at her. Quote, "You cause every single feeling you have, and you should have that from me, not him." You know what? Sounds like Raniere needed a lot of those EMs. That exploration of meaning when you're having these feelings, you need to deal with them. He needed some EMs. She should have turned around and said, "You know what, Keith? You need to go take some EMs. Go get Lauren to give you some at $375 an hour, allegedly." This guy, the hypocrisy is so thick. That's why he didn't have people like me in his group. I'm sorry. I mean, I wouldn't have flown. I probably would have ended up in the Bay, I guess. Raniere freaks out dramatically, being irrational, illogical. Raniere told Danny she was no longer pure. This is a young girl. Danny was confused because she thought that Raniere really loved Pamka Fritz and her sister Mariana. Okay? So her point to him was like, "You don't love me anyway." And she tries to reason with Raniere, and what he does is he goes and he locks himself in a bathroom. Because I think they were on a walk and they continued and he was trying to walk away from her. So he locks himself in the bathroom like a little bitch. Okay? Like a little bitch. And she's sitting there trying to reason with him outside the door. Like, dude. And the way that the story's told, I'm guessing that the other ladies were probably cackling around and, probably trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And so in the tumult, okay, with all the others, he escapes, the little biatch, and he goes upstairs and she chases him. She chases him, trying to reason with him like one would, She chases him up the stairs, trying to talk to him, and he ends up grabbing her arm, and of course, she ends up landing on the floor on a floor mattress. So I'm not saying he threw her down on the ground, but it wasn't pretty. So mind you, she never spoke to Raniere again after this. I want to be really clear about this. I don't believe, and I could be wrong, that she ever had eye-to-eye contact again with him, maybe until the trial. Let that sink in. She has emails with him after. She has communications with him after. She goes here and there at his command after. She's 21 years old. And he's in his late 40s. Is he almost 50 at this point? And she loses all access, all viable, real access to the community, and begins to be shunned because she kissed Ben. Yeah. Are you irritated yet? November 2006. Smallville actress Allison Mack meets Raniere. And I gotta say, I never watched Smallville. So, they always say Smallville actress. I don't know her from anyone. I mean, maybe she was great, okay? I don't know. I'm old. I'm half century old. I don't know Smallville, okay? But Smallville was allegedly filmed in Vancouver. So Allegedly, Allison Mack gets into NXIVM, and that's actually her first introduction to Raniere is seen in The Vow. So go check that out if you're interested in seeing her initial smittenness with Keith and talking about popping cherries and stuff. So allegedly, Allison Mack's sexual relationship did not begin with Raniere until DOS. How true that is, I don't know, but isn't that interesting? I get maybe she wasn't really his type. Because we're talking 2006, the true branding and the beginnings of the DOS don't happen until 2015. Wonder what it was about Allison Mack that he waited that long with her. I don't know. So let's keep it moving. I'm just going to put this one's a little out of order, but in 2007, I'm going to talk about Kristen Keefe, and she's the paralegal of the group. And she had met Keith in 2003, I do believe. So she was the legal liaison as a paralegal for NXIVM ESP. And she worked in their legal department that had no attorneys. But I do believe they ended up hiring attorneys because obviously lawsuits were filed. So I think they hired outside counsel. But no one that was actually in the group that I know of was a physical attorney. They might have had paralegals. She was paralegal. So... And sometimes paralegals knows just as much as an attorney. So I'm not bashing that. I'm just saying, okay? So she has Raniere's baby, guys, Galen. And she bolts out of NXIVM in February 2014. This is going to be very important. Galen, I believe, was 7 when she bolts. Allegedly. Followers were told when Galen was born that Galen was an orphan who they had kindly adopted. But of course, it turns out he's really just the bio child of Kristen Keefe and Keith Raniere. Okay. How effed up is that? That you're going around to even the inner circle and the group saying, oh, we adopted Galen. No, he's their child. And so allegedly, Kristen had been led to believe that Edgar Bronfman, would be against her son because he was such an enemy and he had all this bile and vitriol and hatred and would do all this stuff against NXIVM that her son would be in danger. So she went along with the ruse. But in my opinion, and she probably agrees with this now, Raniere held out this avatar baby carrot, like with all these different women, like you can have my baby, you can have this avatar baby, this special baby, you can be the one to have my baby. Well, she was, 8 months pregnant and didn't know it because they all were so skinny. And then she ends up having the baby. And so, it wasn't approved, essentially, that she could be the one to have the avatar baby. So it would screw up this carrot that he was holding out to all the different women if she was the one that had his baby. So it had to be covered up. And a ruse had to be enacted. And, and then, of course, breaches had to be put in place. This is how he operates, under condemnation and coercion and criticism and fear and manipulation. And so she eventually bolts in 2014 and she goes into hiding. In fact, I think she still is in hiding. And note, Galen didn't get a trust fund, so that's also an issue that got brought up in the trial because the other kid that he ends up having got a trust fund. Galen didn't. So there's some money that's still outstanding that's getting parceled out to the victims and different people. And so Galen didn't get his cut because he didn't have a trust fund. So I think that they're trying to figure out what he should get. So I know, sorry. Let's get back into the timeline. June 26, 2007. Allegedly, the 17-year-old Cammie, she's the youngest one of the Mexican sisters. She's put on birth control because obviously she's having sex with Raniere. And the alarm that she set up on her phone, red pill, when it went off. And so her middle sister, Danny, sees this and doesn't say anything to Cammie, but she puts 2 and 2 together. Oh, Raniere's having sex with my younger sister. So what she does is she warns Raniere that their parents could see this notification. What happens? You know what happens. Pam Fritz allegedly ends up taking the girls for their abortions. Mm-hmm. So Danny testified in trial against Raniere. Danny said that she was assigned to help her sister Cammie during her That's nuts. It's bad enough knowing your older sister, you know, had relations, and then now he's having sex with you, and then you get pregnant, have an abortion, and now your younger sister is having an abortion, and you're going to have to help with it. Danny testified that she and then Cammie were rehearsed on what to say at the clinic by Pam Fritz. You know what? Pam is deceased. I think she'd be spending some time with E.O. Keith in the jail at this point. I don't think they would be waiting on her sentencing at this point. I think she'd be up in the pokey with Keith right now if she wasn't dead. During Cammie's abortion, someone at the office disclosed that Danny had already had one. I mean, HIPAA violation, you know. So Pam Fritz goes allegedly absolutely nuts about patient confidentiality. And according to Danny at trial, Pam started looping, like saying the same thing over and over like a demented parrot, probably about the fact that there was a breach, but she freaked out because she knew, you know, everybody knew. So Danny testified that she felt that Pam was our handler. Yeah, you think so? And seemingly she felt very trapped by the situation. I think that would be quite an understatement, don't you? I mean, yeah, it's crazy. So do you think that these sisters chose this of their own volition, that this is what they signed up for? This is before DOS. I mean, we haven't even gotten to what, 2007 yet? What are we talking? 2007. DOS doesn't officially start until 2015. Keith was already laying the groundwork for what he was planning in DOS. Between the years of 2005 and 2007, allegedly, the Bronfmans had lost millions in the commodities trades through Raniere. Raniere lost allegedly 70 million in the commodities trading. So not such a genius, that Raniere, eh? And Raniere suggested that the loss, when he was called out on it, he suggested that the loss was due to Edgar Sr. manipulating the market against him. Yeah, that there are powerful forces against you. You know, really? Really? Like Edgar would be so vicious that he would really want someone his daughters allegedly gave money to lose all their money just to spite this guy. Does that make any sense to you whatsoever? Good. Because it shouldn't make sense to you. Oh, this is where it gets crazy, and there's allegedly still part of a lawsuit outstanding regarding this. How this can go on this long, it boggles the mind. But let me try to attack this very succinctly, because I don't want to get into this. Frank Parlato was allegedly hired due to this adverse publicity that's going on. So Parlato claims that he was paid for by the Bronfmans. And Parlato also claims that he got NXIVM good press and that he was given more assignments, all right? So then the Bronfmans had lost some investments, and according to him, he recovered some assets for them. Allegedly, Parlato told Claire that the money, some of this money had been laundered. And so he retrieved some of it. And allegedly, he took a sum of this returned money as a bonus. I don't know if it was agreed upon. Don't know that. It was a small percentage, but he took some of the money, and then allegedly they wanted it returned. And he was like a former publicist, and then now he's a journalist, and he's got the Frank Report, and he's got a blog, and it's got a lot of information on NXIVM, and it's got a lot of good information, but I feel he's sort of misogynistic. That's just my opinion. I have a hard time reading this stuff, but people do give him interviews, and there's some gold to mine in them there hills, but sometimes you have to look past a lot of crap to mine it. So allegedly he makes it in his goal to expose NXIVM. He leaves in 2008, and what happens? A lawsuit occurs. So, and I think part of that lawsuit is still going on, and I will get back into it, but let's get off of that, all right? November 2005, and this also goes on to 2009, but it starts in November 2005. Danny, the middle sister, testified at Raniere's trial that Raniere wanted to gain access to Kristen Snyder's email account. Now think, who is Kristen Snyder? That is the the lady that went missing in February 2003 and left the suicide note in the truck, okay? He wants access in November 2005, allegedly, to her email account. And he said that he had a theory and was trying to disprove it. So he was willing to pay, according to Danny, he was willing to pay $24,000 for a password for someone to like hack it and give him the password to her account. And allegedly, according to her, they obtained the password. Now, I want to know what was in her emails. Must not have been anything of note, because we haven't heard anything, but apparently that got the taste going of this hacking. They obtained the password, and Danny, because think she's young, she's not, what's she doing? She's got all day long. So she starts learning how to hack into people's computers and accounts. This is her own testimony. She went online, she spent all her time learning how to hack, like using the keylogger software and other techniques. And mind you, these were honor students. These are not stupid women, girls. So she spends all her time learning how to do this. She testified to all of this at Keith Raniere's trial. Daniela also provides a USB device, allegedly to Claire, allegedly for Claire to hack her own father's computer. Essentially, you would just put it in, it would install like something, and then it would probably track the keystrokes. I believe that was the technique. Daniela testified to then accessing and copying and to pasting into, like say, Word or whatever, the target's emails. So she would then grab all the information, get into the account, grab the emails, put it into, say, like another document for Raniere's perusal. So she admitted to hacking via the USB port a James Loper Fido, Edgar Bronfman, and her own sister Mariana. And I think that's happened in 2009. So over time. Over this period into November 2008, Danny hacks into her own sister's computer. That's Mariana. Why? Allegedly, Pamka Fritz and Keith suspected Mariana of having relations with an ex. How dare she? So Danny testified that she felt bad hacking her own sister's computer, but that it was, quote, an issue she needed to overcome. So think about this. You're having an ethical dilemma. You have ethics. You're having an ethical dilemma, and you're told it is, the thing that's illegal and immoral is something that's an issue you need to overcome. How come no one turned around and said, Keith, you need an EM that you don't trust Mariana. You need an EM that you're so worried about Mariana and her ex. How come no one turned this tech around on him and told his butt to get an EM? They were too manipulated and terrified to dare go against him. Danny hacks her sister, sends Raniere the password because she allegedly did not want to surveil her own sister. So Danny testified that she felt that it was an unforgivable breach of privacy to hack her own sister. And also with Danny, when she was digitizing some of Raniere's music, he had everybody doing all kinds of different jobs and tasks, So she was digitizing his music, and he told her, something's funky with my computer. So she goes to work on it, and she finds his like trophy files of his nudes of all these women, people she knew. Inner circle probably, and who knows what else. Not people like on random Pornhub sites, like people she knew. And her own pictures. And she allegedly asked him, like, yo, can you please delete my nodes off your computer? Oh, gosh. So we're circling back to Stephen Hurwitz. That's the lawyer that worked for Edgar Bronfman, the one who punted the issue off to public relations when he was asked to help. So according to Stephen's testimony at Raniere's trial, the girls asked Stephen to help them with Rick Allen Ross. Allegedly, I think he's a cult deprogrammer, but there might be another title, but that's what I understood that he is. And allegedly, they wanted any disagreements with Rick Ross resolved before the Dalai Lama was to come to town, because they were trying to get the Dalai Lama to come and kind of like meet Keith. And so, yeah, they wanted the Dalai Lama to come, and it's almost like the Dalai Lama coming is kind of co-signing your organization, right? Essentially, if he meets with you and has pictures taken with you that you could then go out and put off as PR and stuff. So they wanted everything all nice and clean for him to come, because then we start getting troubles where he's allegedly finding out that there's problems and maybe doesn't want to come. And so they are trying to clean everything up. So they go to Stephen again, all right? And Stephen seems like a really great guy. And Edgar Bronfman also to me seems like a really great mensch. He does. And as an exception, Stephen agrees that he'll look, he was asked to help by Claire. He's going to look into their concerns. And according to Stephen, they refused to tell him what they specifically needed help with. So they come and they have a meeting, but they won't specifically, when he's trying to ask him as an attorney, to nail down what the problem is, how I can help, they tell him it's a secret. So he tells them he's not a puppet. This is all in the court case. This is all what his recollection of it with the emails to back up the said conversations. He suggested to them that they ask their attorneys to retain him for $1 and then send him the documents that they had concerns with. Then that he would give the documents a perusal, provide his ideas, suggestions, and thoughts, and send it back. Okay, so he's like, this is what you need to do. So they sent him the documents, but they never paid the $1 to him. There was no consideration for the contract, nada. All right. So Stephen wrote them a 7-page memo, according to him, according to what was released at trial, saying essentially, and I'm going to paraphrase here, everything you suggest here is wrong. This is what he tells them. The idea of suing him civilly would extend beyond the period in which they were trying to achieve their goal. Their goal essentially being the planned visit of the Dalai Lama. You don't want an ongoing lawsuit going on with all kinds of smearing going on when you're trying to get the Dalai Lama to come and show like how you're such a great self-improvement group, right? So that's what he's going on in the 7-page memo. And he suggested to them that if they wanted to pave the ground for the visit, to make an aggressive PR campaign to show the merits of NXIVM and to establish its credibility. Seemingly, they were trying to clear up any issues before the Dalai Lama came, and so that NXIVM could have a good reputation. And starting these lawsuits, he was like, no, boot to the PR man, right? If it was only that easy, right? But when you have vindictive bones in your body, it doesn't work that way, right? So in 2008, Mariana, Daniela, Adrian, and Camilla, those are the 4 siblings, the Mexican nationals. They're all allegedly unlawfully in the United States, okay? So to add insult to all the essay of the 2, they're allegedly in the United States in 2008. And at some point, Raniere is absolutely favoring Mariana, the oldest one, over everyone else, even in the inner circle. And allegedly, they're having kind of like an out relationship. In other words, like people think, oh, she's the girlfriend, at least in the inner circle. So she's the one, okay? And allegedly, for the Mexican family, extensions were supposed to have been filed for their visas, right? They've got a legal department, right? You think that'd be like top priority. Maybe they tried, who knows? But they weren't extended or they weren't approved. It boggles the mind because, and in my opinion, being illegal here in the U.S. and under his protection is just another manipulative tool. Like they're dependent on him, and there's always that threat of being deported if they displease him. So you wonder how he could manipulate people? Well, there you go. Just threatened to deport you. Also 2008, remember Sylvie, the horse jumper? Okay, we're going to talk about her. She meets her soon-to-be husband in from the program, and she asks Raniere if she can date her soon-to-be husband John, under the guise of marrying him for a green card. Because I believe she was British. And I think she figured this ruse would work with Raniere because he liked these kind of ruses, didn't he? So Raniere allegedly told her to keep it platonic. Okay, he tells her, to keep it platonic? Why not have a love affair? Why not be like, yeah, marry him, and if it blossoms into something, so much the better. No, he tells her to keep it platonic. So she actually marries him in July of 2015. And keep in mind that she goes years within this group with the members telling her not to have sex with her own husband. And this is before DOS. So I'm weaving in these different folks and letting you know that he has a history. Before DOS is created, he's already laying the groundwork with all these different women. Vicente later testified that in June 2008, he and others illegally altered videotapes in order to defend the tech. He said that they removed portions of Nancy Salzman making medical claims regarding rational inquiry, and those tapes were supposed to be produced in a court case. And he says he was kind of ignorant about the substance of the case, but he essentially did what he was told to do, and he admitted this all under oath at Keith Raniere's trial. So he admitted to altering videotapes that were supposed to be given over in previous cases. Just FYI, in my opinion, everybody got their hands dirty. It's very Manson-esque, and you know what? Everybody's going to get their hands dirty in some way, shape, or form. It keeps people invested. It keeps you manipulated. It keeps you lying for the other people, because you're going to have your hands dirty even if it's just doing this illegal act. Okay? April 2009. This is when the NXIVM 9 leave. I wonder why. I wonder why the NXIVM 9 left, guys, right? Barbara Boucher, Susan Dones, and 7 others allegedly had issues with the running of the organization, the Raniere sleeping with the executive board, and the money that was owed to them. So they were deemed to be defectors and enemies. And it must have taken a group to leave at the same time. Now what we know about the whole enterprise and how this whole thing broke apart, you got to think the NXIVM 9 knew that it needed a group effort and that maybe there would be safety in numbers, right? To all leave at the same time and confront him at the same time. Nope, there really wasn't safety in numbers. There really wasn't at that time. Susan Dones was one of the NXIVM 9 that left. She asked for her commissions and the value of the Washington NXIVM, I think it was the Northwest NXIVM business, because she had gotten up to the point and she was operating a portion of that. And in response, she was called an extortionist. Okay? Sued and called an extortionist. See, asking for money that you believe that you're owed, like you believe you're owed money from an employer or whatever, that's not extortion. It isn't. And Mark Vicente said that after the NXIVM 9, that group left, he did damage control in, say, like the Tacoma Center in Seattle. And after the NXIVM 9 left, Vicente was promoted. So a lot of people did get promotions essentially when the NXIVM 9 left, because it was a good chunk of the inner circle. So in an MLM, sometimes if one whole entire line leaves, you can get essentially a promotion, and it is a big deal. So you wonder like, oh, why did some other people stay? Well, money. And maybe they hadn't seen the light yet. So this is the end of part 3. We have plenty coming up. We haven't even talked about, say, Sarah Edmondson and India and Bonnie and all the other ones that you hear so much about. We're talking a lot about the earlier members and the earlier suicides and deaths. And we've got more to come, guys. Not too much more, but I'm going to talk about the latter group. I'm going to talk about DOS, and I'm going to break it down for you to understand how these folks were manipulated this way. And I don't ever want to come off as seeming that I feel like I'm a better person than these people that I talk about. Even in any of my videos, I'd like to think I'm a better person than the serial killers that I talk about. But, I mean, it's easy to be an armchair quarterback and to make comments after the fact. But I think that in life we can look and see how we are susceptible to manipulation. I mean, just look at the election, right? The American election, I mean, both sides were heavily manipulated. I don't think anybody could argue that. People in my family still aren't talking to certain other members over the damn election. These are educated, very intelligent folks. So the fact that say that you couldn't be manipulated, I don't think that's true. But the first time an American stands up and screams to me in my comment section that they would never in a million years have been manipulated, did you come out of the election unscathed? I mean, just saying. I know it's a different ball game, but I just want to say I don't want to come off as perfect. I'm not. I know I'm not. I'm a very fallible person, and I just want to get that out of the way. And so I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Part 4 will be up soon. And without further ado, have an excellent day. Bye.